Welcome to the Ranch Workforce Project, a limited series collaboration between the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance and Montana State University's Dan Scott Ranch Management Program, a project to address the domestic labor shortage on farms and ranches, a project to replenish the pipeline, a project to attract new people into an old industry, a project to face what has to change from within. Because the future of agriculture doesn't just depend on land and livestock, it depends on people. And now, your host, Haylie Shipp.
Welcome to the Ranch Workforce Project. I am your host, Haylie Shipp. Thanks for joining us here today as we continue to discuss rebuilding the pipeline that is bringing workers into the agricultural industry. And I want to preface right off the top here, we say rancher a lot. This series really is something of interest for folks throughout the agricultural industry. Labor is one of the biggest pressure points. Sometimes your labor need might be a full-time, long-term employee. We're discussing that during this series. We are not discussing that specifically on this episode. What we're talking about today is filling those positions that are short-term labor by design. So seasonal labor, internships, and apprentices. First off, let's get into some very basic definitions. Seasonal labor, that's just pretty much transactional. You are paying someone who perceivably has the training needed to get a job done. Next, we're going to go on to an internship. This one shifts into a teaching role. Now, you're not going to pay out as much, but you are going to have a lot of hours invested as you bring a more inexperienced worker into the industry. Now, an apprenticeship raises the bar. It's higher pay, there's higher expectations, and a longer time commitment. The focus here is truly on teaching thought processes along with logistics, developing not just ability, but also understanding. It's a big topic. To help me unpack it today, I am joined by co-host Rachel Frost with the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program at Montana State University, Taylre Sitz Zempel of Sitz Angus Ranch, and Dan Leahy with the Foundation for Ranch Management. So Rachel, let's go ahead and get started out with you. You are the one that kind of outlined this framework for the Ranch Workforce Project. Why was this topic specifically part of the list?
Thanks, Haylie. Yeah, I'm really excited about this episode. Maybe one of the most exciting episodes, I think, in the whole Workforce Project. And that's because for centuries, other businesses and professions have used internships and apprentices to train the next generation and to bring them on board with these skills and the experience that they need to be successful. I think there is tremendous potential for this in ranches. We're seeing it open up in ranches, but also not be used to its potential. The other reason that I'm excited about this conversation is that words really have meanings and they carry expectations with them. And so these different titles have a set of expectations for the young people that are entering into those positions, as well as for the ranches that are hosting them. However, I don't think those expectations are exactly aligned all the time. And so I'm excited to hear from Dan and from Taylre, who both of them have extensive experience working in this realm. And they've seen it from both sides. They understand the expectations that young people have as far as the amount of time that a ranch is going to devote to them or the specific duties that they'll be doing in an internship versus an apprentice versus seasonal labor. And I think that they can speak to both sides for that, for what young people should really expect in those positions, as well as to the ranch side about if I am entering into an apprenticeship, what do I need to provide to this student or this young person? And what's that going to mean as far as an investment of my time and my expertise and mentorship for that student?
Well, let's lay the groundwork for who is talking with us on the podcast today. So first up, we've got Taylre Sitz Zempel. And Taylre, you are with Sitz Angus. Kind of give us that elevator speech, if you will, a little bit about Sitz Angus and then a little bit about your role within the business.
Okay, Haylie, Rachel, thank you guys so much for having me on today. I'm really honored to be here. Yes, I work alongside my family at Sitz Angus. We're a generational seed stock ranch located in southwest Montana. We raise and sell registered Angus cattle and have been in the Angus industry for over 100 years. And for the last 40 of those years, we've actually had an internship program of some sort. It's changed a bit throughout the years, but We have been kind of established in the internship side of things for a while. Here at Sitz Angus, we really believe that ranching is a team sport. We could not do what we do without the great people behind us, and part of that is the interns. For me personally, I went to Montana State University and graduated in 2018. I earned a bachelor's in animal science and minored in business administration, and then I ended up going back and working under the Del Curto lab to get a master's in animal science later. I have managed the internship program as part of my role on the ranch since 2018, and we typically host 2 to 3 interns per year with 2 to 3 different internship seasons.
That's awesome, Taylre. It sounds like we're going to be able to discuss a lot of these topics with you. So we've also got Dan Leahy with us. Dan is with the Foundation for Ranch Management. Dan, do the same. Why don't you give us kind of your introduction and also the introduction for the foundation?
Sure. Thanks, Haylie, and thank you, Rachel, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to get to work with Rachel, and this is just one more opportunity. So I'm very happy to meet Taylre for the first time. We spoke on the phone yesterday, and looking forward to working with her as well. So as Rachel knows, I came to work on this subject matter kind of as a result of searching that I'd done in my own industry, because as working as a consultant, I would often be in the position of having to replace myself once I had reorganized a property. And so I was literally hiring all the time. And so realizing that there was a gap in hiring and in the supply of prepared young people ready to come into agriculture, that I got together with a couple other people, and we said, well, why don't we form a little foundation? It would give us a platform to study this issue. And it would also give an opportunity for other people who are also asking the same questions to participate with us. And so that's how it started. And so one of my first engagements after that was actually speaking at Montana State University. So this is all kind of coming back around here to Old Home Week.
So Dan, you were a consultant in that you were consulting for ranches and then realizing that there was this gap after you were leaving that ranch for somebody to come in.
Right. It would often be part of the entire scope of the project to identify a new manager for that ranch, because I wasn't going to stay indefinitely. So it became a regular cycle for me, and that's how I got to be so exposed to the realities of the marketplace.
Gotcha. Okay, so we want to do some definitions here. We've got interns, we've got apprentices, and we've got traditional seasonal labor that we're talking about today. And I'm going to low-hanging fruit, traditional seasonal labor. I think I can kind of understand this one. This is, you've got irrigated ground that you need help haying. You've got different seasonal projects, some fencing in the summer. Maybe you're a snowbird and you need somebody to feed your cows for you. I would like that right now, as Glasgow's been really sitting at 20 degrees below zero here lately. But this seasonal labor is something that's a little bit, I think, easier to grasp for folks that haven't dove into the intern or the apprentice world. Dan, I'll kind of throw this one to you to start out with. As you look at the big scope of ranches that you've helped through this, do you see a lot of folks turning to this just because it kind of is that easy plug the hole, save the boat, keep it afloat type of a thing?
Well, it can be. It just depends upon, the business mind of the individual rancher. There's a lot of variety in ranching. I mean, let me put it this way. If we refer to this as labor as an issue or as a problem that needs to be solved, keep in mind that we're only talking about the ranches who express a need. There are a lot of ranches that are doing it really well, and we don't hear about them because they don't have a problem. So I always like to acknowledge that. It's not something that's specific to ranching, and it's not something that all ranches suffer from. But when we're talking about how are we going to bring in a next generation of young ranchers, young producers? That's where it becomes operational, because that's the juncture that we're talking about. And if young people can't persist and succeed through that awkward beginning stage, then they'll never arrive, obviously. So that's really what we're talking about. So then, to answer your question, Haylie, the individual ranch needs to be really deliberate about, um, uh, are we going to hire every year in an attempt to save money during the winter, or we can't keep people busy during the winter? Or are we going to have a broader approach to hiring, put each position on a broader foundation basis, um, so that we can keep those people continuously? Um, that's the first thing, is just being aware of what your method is. And then, to Taylor's situation, to her circumstances, and I'll let her speak to this, is once you've decided that you want a seasonal program, then what does that program consist of? Don't let it be accidental. Make it be very deliberate and programmatic. So the expectations are well known.
Dan, that opens a really good whole tangent discussion that I'm just going to go on to just the tip of the iceberg on. But as you are looking at the pros and cons of, do I only hire seasonally, or try to save that money during the off season, or do I bring somebody on full time and have some consistency with that for both me as the employer and them as the employee? How do you weigh those options? How do you kind of help folks make those decisions?
A lot of it depends on the operation itself. And what I find, that if people are asking for input, which typically in my situation they are, I don't force it upon them, but they're asking for input, then we do an assessment. And oftentimes people are so accustomed to their own environment, they can't be objective about their own circumstances. So just having a chance to talk to somebody and say, okay, this is what I observe about what's going on here. And because I see so many ranches and so many different environments, those things pop out at me. And so I'll ask questions of them to get them to think that they wouldn't normally, they just take it, assume that it's a forever thing, and it's just the way it is. And somebody like myself, or even Rachel, when she's interviewing a host ranch, she can say, does this need to be this way? Because if we did a little change over here, it would open up another opportunity. And it's looking at things fresh, that gives the ranch opportunity to answer those questions, because nobody's ever asked them those questions before. They always assumed, we've done this way for 40 years. This is the way it's done here.
If I may jump in here, just kind of as a third option, if you will, between the full-time and the seasonal, I think remembering that you could always have a part-time person too. There is kind of an added layer of flexibility there in that option.
Taylre, as I was thinking about this, if somebody has made that decision that I'm not going to keep somebody on all year long, and they are going to go towards somebody that is not a full-time position. Now let's get into starting to define some of the apprentice versus intern versus seasonal labor. So as you said, it's really intern heavy with Sitz Angus. That's the program that you've been doing with 2 to 3 interns each year. What by definition is an intern as opposed to an apprentice? I think it's probably easiest to put those two up just right against each other and kind of do some differences and some similarities, because the words themselves, and I'm sure the definitions, are very close.
Yes. And actually here at the ranch, we kind of have a mix of, we have great full-time, we have part-time, and we have seasonal, and we have interns. So we kind of have a mix of things. But getting into your question, for me, an internship is a learning, working opportunity for a student in the industry to gain experience and skills within a relatively limited time frame. For us, it's usually kind of based on semesters. Versus an apprenticeship, which is very similar, a learning, working opportunity for a student to gain skills and experience in a little bit longer time period. So you have your apprentice a little bit longer than perhaps you would an intern. So for me, that's the key difference between those two positions.
Well, Taylre, ahead of this podcast, gave some just very straightforward definitions that I'm going to just kind of lay down here. Internship, a learning working opportunity for a student of the industry to gain experience and skills in a relatively limited time frame, can still require some foundational knowledge and skills, versus the apprenticeship. That's a learning working opportunity for a student of the industry to gain experience and skills in a relatively extended time frame. And then that seasonal labor, the worker that is able to relatively seamlessly be onboarded to a program and carry their portion of the work with limited training in regards to skill and expertise. So everybody's telling me, no matter the industry, nobody wants to work anymore. Taylre, as you're looking at onboarding, whether it's seasonal, part-time, apprentice, intern, is there a long list? Is it a short list? What's the reality for you in bringing on people in agriculture?
You know, Haylie, I think it is really dependent on the position. But what I'm seeing on the intern side is there's a lot of young people that are really excited about agriculture and putting themselves out there for those positions. I think that there is an exciting amount of young people that are looking for experience in agriculture, which I think is wonderful. But I also think depending on what you're hiring for, it can be really hard to find people to fit certain roles. We were recently hiring for a night caver position, and thankfully we were able to find a really excellent person to fill that role. But, just kind of perusing through some of the ads out there on, Ranch World ads or other job sites, everybody's looking for a night caver right now. And so I think depending on what you're hiring for, it can be really hard to find people to fit certain roles, especially if you're looking for people to have a certain level of expertise.
Dan, we often talk about this romanticism, especially of the American West, when we talk about cattle ranching. For folks that are listening to this podcast, you're wearing a nice silver belly cowboy hat. You fit that demographic of what people are aspiring to grow up to be when they think about a rancher. And I also just want to throw it out there. We're saying ranching a lot in this podcast. Rachel and I are both based in livestock, and those are the worlds we live in, but very much a realistic issue for all of agriculture, whether it's grain farmers, folks that are growing fruit. This is not exclusive to just the cattle ranching industry. But Dan, how do we deal with, as Taylre's saying, that there are a lot of people excited about getting into the industry, the fact that some of those might not have the most realistic expectations of what it actually is to be working in this industry?
Sure. And this is another opportunity for us to contrast the internship with the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship, one of the characteristics of apprenticeship is that of practice with the goal of mastery. Okay, so you've moved beyond the intern experience part of your education, and you're beginning to look at ranch management as a profession. And you're starting to recognize the level of commitment that it's going to take for you to arrive. And that's why it's a longer term commitment, a longer term time frame, is because you have to have the time for practice. That's the only way we improve, through repetition and learning. So that's the key difference in my mind. But to your point, Haylie, what I tell young people who are talking to a rancher and preparing to make a commitment like this is, you have better understand when you're out there on the range, or when you're in the barnyard, or wherever you are on the ranch, on the land, you need to ask yourself, is there any place else on earth I would rather be? Because you are making a commitment of that level. And it's not going to get less and less lonely in that profession. It will be more and more lonely. And so if you don't thoroughly enjoy every aspect of the land, of the animals, of the neighbors, everything about that ranch, you're eventually going to wish you were someplace else. Okay. Now, the reason I say that is because it's an issue of mindset. Just like Rachel was talking about the mindset of a student going into their first internship, when you're talking to young people about the profession of ranching, you really need to help them place their mind somewhere in the future and ask themselves hard questions, because that's what allows them to succeed on a day-to-day basis, to go to work and thoroughly enjoy every part of it. I'll tell you a really quick little example here. We had a chance to help out on a ranch in Nevada this summer, and they had, in most recent years, 7 years ago, had a huge fire, and it wiped out the entire ranch. And so all of that weakness is still there. It's a latent effect of this big fire. And one of the greatest issues is fencing, because even if fire doesn't take out a fence, it weakens it substantially. And then you've just got this continuous issue of fencing. Well, I fenced all summer long. I'm a 63-year-old man, and I fenced all summer long. Why? Because that's exactly what that ranch needed. Okay. Now, I'm not bragging. I'm saying to young people, always be prepared to do exactly what is needed when it's needed. And it's a mindset that Rachel refers to, and it's the greatest challenge for the individual. And that's where we try to encourage them the most.
What I heard in your answer as well, Dan, is that, my question was about, romanticizing things and then realizing it's maybe sometimes not as romantic when you're out there. But we also probably have to look at it with romantic eyes, because that's what's going to keep us in the business. You got to look for those things that you're really grateful for, and find those bits of gratitude in what you're doing, because that's what you need to power you through some of the ickier times, and the mundane, and the isolation, and some of the hard things that do come with a world in agriculture. Up next, I want to talk about what the rancher has to do. What are the rancher responsibilities? Because all of us, yes, get me more work, figure out a way that somebody else can pay for it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be bad. But what are some rancher responsibilities as we look at these? Taylre, I'll start out with you. What do you see as main rancher responsibilities, whether we're looking at any of these areas for seasonal labor?
I think your first responsibility when you're thinking about, hey, I need some help here, is deciding what kind of help you're wanting and how much teaching you're willing to do. As we're hiring for a night calving position, I don't want to do a ton of teaching. I really want somebody who can step into that role and be proficient. And luckily, we were able to find somebody excellent at that. On the intern side of things, I am hiring an intern with the expectation that I'm going to spend some time explaining things, teaching them about different aspects of the ranch, hearing what they have to say, because I think one of the great benefits of having an intern or having young people around is so often they'll go, so why do you do that? And then you go, yeah, why do I do that? And that's just good reflection. And sometimes you have great answers for that, and sometimes you go, yeah, we could probably switch that up. So I think that's kind of the first step in responsibility of the rancher, is deciding which avenue you're going to take. From there, if you do decide to have a just seasonal traditional labor person, you're still going to have to onboard them, I think, to integrate them successfully. You're still going to have to show them some things and let them know what the expectations are. I feel like that's irregardless of any position you hire for. And then if you do decide to hire for an intern type program, I think you need to think about balancing the work that truly you're expecting to get from an intern or anyone you hire, versus what you're going to teach, and kind of balancing that out. So that's kind of the next layer of responsibility. So for me, it's going, okay, I really want to hire an intern that has some foundational knowledge so that they can be safe throughout the ranch. But I'm really willing to teach them about calving and different animal health protocols and that sort of thing. So I think getting clear on your expectations is huge. And then making sure that when you post that job or post that internship, you are presenting those expectations correctly.
So Taylre doing a great job of explaining that it's important the rancher evaluates yourself, make sure that you are not promising more than you can give as far as training, and then also making sure that you can really identify clearly the tasks that you're putting out there for whoever that labor is. One of the, I just, logistics. Dan, I'm going to throw this one to you because you work more on a broader scale across the nation, but what is this going to cost me? Do I have to have a place for them to live? I live in very rural Northeast Montana. There's not a lot of housing around. And so as I think of bringing in somebody short term, I about have to be able to provide that because there's not going to be a place close by that I can just rent for 4 months. So what are some of just those kind of like the tangible, the logistic things that a rancher needs to do if they want to bring on this type of labor?
Sure. And again, to Taylor's point, first be very clear about who you're trying to attract and put yourself in their shoes. Okay. If you're looking for, let's use a couple examples. If you're looking for a cowboy who just wants to rope and ride, they're going to be most comfortable or most likely comfortable in a dirty bunkhouse situation where nobody is taking responsibility for the trash or anything else. And the reason I bring that up is because you don't ever know what you're going to find when you walk onto a ranch, right, Rachel? It could be anything. So the reality of your question, Haylie, is be conscious of who you want to attract, because you might get that person and then they come into the situation, you didn't give any thought to living accommodations or whether or not they have a vehicle to get back and forth to town or what the grocery allotment is on the ranch, those types of things. And you might lose that good person in a week. They might ghost you. They might just disappear. They say, this isn't for me. Okay. And it's because the ranch is so consumed or so accustomed to how they've always done things, they didn't look at it through another person's eyes. And sometimes you do need to make accommodations for individuals to get over that hump, to get to know each other. Even for the first 2 weeks are the most critical in any employment relationship. That's logistics, especially with apprenticeship. If you're entering into a contractual apprenticeship relationship and it has a longer term to it, you don't want housing, transportation, food, those basic necessities to be a detractor from what you're trying to accomplish. They don't have to be extraordinary, but they can't be a negative. That's the first threshold, is make sure those negatives are removed.
I want to get into story time. We're just going to sit around and have not story hour. We don't have an hour left. You don't have to worry about that. But story 10 minutes. Let's talk about how this really impacts the ranch worker pipeline, how this really impacts ranches, how this really impacts people at the end of the day. Because, we've been talking nothing too emotional, nothing too, nothing about people. So Rachel, I'm going to throw this one to you first. You have, of course, you're with the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program. You've got multiple students that go through this at Montana State University. They learn about agriculture, ag business, all of the different things. But then a select number get to go into your internship program. It's sort of an elite deal. It's competitive, and I know you have seen some really rewarding situations. And so paint us a positive picture. The world needs some positivity right now. Let's talk about some of the good that's come out of some of these internships.
Haylie, that's an easy topic for me to talk about because that's what gets me up every morning. That's what makes all of the rest of the mundane stuff that goes along with working at a university really worthwhile. It really does come back to the people. And when you see a student come in as a freshman and they are so eager to get into agriculture, it is their dream, and they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to make that physical connection. And they get into this program because we are selecting students based on their potential, not on their experience. We're an undergraduate program, and we're not able to sort out who's the best of the best at this point, right? It's about giving people opportunities. And so when they get into this program with all of the potential and all of the desire and none of the experience, some do come in with good experience, and we can pair them with a ranch and see that mentor relationship blossom. Yeah, that is the best part of my job. And just so, for example, you asked for stories. So I'm going to show you just a couple of stories, and a lot of them are stories that are rooted in failure. Okay. Two young ladies, for example, that came from small ranches, had a little bit of experience, went to two different internship hosts. Their first summer was nothing short of a train wreck. Right. I'm getting calls from the ranch host going, I'm not sure that this is going to last. Like, we're really struggling. This is hard. But they make it through the first summer. They spend that next fall and winter really reflecting, taking those evaluations from their mentor to heart. I had one young lady that printed out a less than favorable evaluation, and she literally taped it to the door frame where every time she walked outside the door, she had to read that evaluation. She said, so I know specifically what I need to work on every day. And just great attitudes that they went to the next summer to their ranches, completely different experience. So much growth, so much maturity, so much ability to learn. Both of the ranches gave them extremely high evaluations, and I'm seeing interns that are being hired. And one of those young ladies who was threatening to be fired her first summer is now going on as a full-time employee for the ranch post-graduation. So there are examples of both ranches persevering on that mentor side through that struggle, that hard mismatch of expectations or whatever you want to call it, that slog through, and then seeing just tremendous growth and response on the other side. I have a student who graduated from the program 3 years ago and just took a job in Canada managing 2,500 head on his own because of the way he has grown in the program, and not from an ag background, but brings a really great willingness to learn, a humility to the program to where I can take feedback and I can incorporate that and not take it personally. So yeah, there's a ton of potential out there. And I do not see a student one that makes it all the way through this program that is the same as when they were a freshman. They are foundationally changed, whether they go into ranch management or not. They might go into another support industry of agriculture, but they are changed from the root of their being and who they are in a really positive way, because they collided with agriculture and all of the great things that happen in agriculture and all of the values that come from agriculture that attracted them in the first place. And when you do that and collide with agriculture, you don't walk away the same.
Dan, how about you? Give me a chicken soup for my soul type of a story. Make me feel good about this sort of thing.
Sure. Well, I'll just pick an example, like just as Rachel did. One young gentleman that was referred to me initially by a rancher in Oregon, because that rancher thought this individual had potential, but was concerned. And so that he made that introduction. And so after a couple of initial conversations with this young person, I learned that he had a rangeland management degree. He's trying to figure out why he did that. See, so getting to know people is often, almost always, the first step, and you need to spend time doing that. The reality was that he wanted to be a rancher, and why he didn't focus on that, we don't know. But it took him a couple of years to realize this about himself. And then he went to work for a variety of ranches, and each of those experiences was a false start. And so it was literally a matter of years of us talking late night on the phone. He subsequently became married. So at one point, I'll do a little plug for our program here. But in our materials, Haylie, we have skills and abilities and knowledge base items. But what's key in our program is that we rate and date ourselves on these functional abilities and maturities. And so, I challenged him at one point, 2.5 years ago, to sit down with his wife and rate himself on this grid of abilities and skills that he really needed to have in his toolkit in order to pursue his goal of ranch management. And it was really after they did that together that they just started to take off. And, his vocabulary changed, his attitude changed, and it was because he took ownership of his circumstances. He had made that mental shift that Rachel talked about, where you struggle for a while and seemingly none of the gears are meshing. But through persistence and a little bit of tutelage, somebody caring about your circumstances, you can get through that. That's probably the most encouraging thing I want young people to take from this whole podcast is you don't get to choose your path because life isn't that way. But persistence and being honest about your motivations will get you to where you want to be. So long story short, a year ago, this guy and his young wife got the assistant management position on a famous and storied ranch in Oregon. And they're expecting their first child. So, that in my mind is what it's all about. Getting young people to that point where they've got their feet firmly on the ground and they're working for a well-managed ranch where they can continue to learn. That's the goal.
Love that story. Taylre, how about you? I'm sure you've got lots of feel-good stories that Sitz Angus.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had so many great interns throughout the years from all over the United States, which is really helpful when it comes to delivering bowls because we have so many really great places where, we have some different kids in Iowa um, that will overnight bowls at, or, they'll end up being bowl customers. And it's really fun to continue those relationships past the internship as friendships and really colleagues. So that's been really fun. It's really fun to see kids go back to their family operations and they decide to take different skill sets that they learned here or learned more about here and implement them at home. We've had interns that have gone on to work for some of the larger bull studs, and then we'll get to see them in the fall because they're coming back as part of their job to come scout out our bulls. So it's just been it's really fun to see where everybody goes after the internship. Um, we've really enjoyed that. And we've even had interns that have become full-time crew members, and that's always really fun too. And perhaps certainly makes you feel good about the internship program that it went well enough that they came back to work with us full time. So yeah, I've had lots of different great experiences with different interns throughout the years, and even a couple of years ago, some interns that would have been at the ranch, really when I was a kid, they come back and they spend a week here when we preg check, or they come back and visit with us, and I think that's just really rewarding to continue those relationships through the years.
Taylre, first I was going to tease you about just training up your next set of customers, but
Yeah.
obviously they enjoyed the experience and the opportunity if they're going to keep coming back and supporting you all. So very, very nice to hear. We're almost out of time, so I'm just going to say last thoughts and any references that you would like to share for people that maybe are thinking, I'd like an apprentice, I'd like an intern, I don't know where to start. Taylre, I'll start with you. Kind of if you could just sort of conclude your thoughts for today and share some of where you would lead people to.
Yeah, thank you, Haylie. I think in kind of concluding my thoughts is that I feel like so often when we talk about labor in agriculture, there's a little bit of a dark cloud that hangs over that topic. And I think we should be somewhat encouraged that there's some sunlight shining through there. There's a lot of kids really interested. There's a lot of people really interested in agriculture. And I think as a ranch, the clearer you can get on what your expectations are and presenting those expectations in a really realistic way, I think that is a path for success in finding labor. Um, In terms of some resources that I think would be really helpful, I know Rachel has a bunch of resources and lots of seminars that she has put on that can be really helpful in, creating internships or, looking at different avenues for labor. When it comes to posting a job or posting a position, Julie Hagar at Montana State University, I've worked with her a lot, and she's great. She has a whole email list that goes out to, I think it's at this point probably hundreds or thousands of current Montana State students and alumni. So that would be a good option. I've worked with Jessie Jarvis at Of the West quite a bit, and she's fabulous, and her platform is fabulous for posting jobs related to agriculture. I found that social media, if your ranch has a social media page, that's a great way to reach students, as well as just kind of reaching out to different universities and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have any students that would be interested, or can you post this ad or talk about it in class? That's another great way to get positions out there. So those would be a few resources I would share with folks. And yeah, just thank you guys so much. It's been such a pleasure to visit with you and hear your expertise on the subject. I feel like I'm kind of coming into this as the newbie on the conversation. So it's been really fun to visit with you all.
I'm just somebody now in control of a ranch thinking I need some help, but I have no time to train them, but I need to figure this out, which I think is probably a situation, not the new to a ranch management position, but a lot of people just don't have the time, and it's making that realization that you need to make the time if this is something that's important to you, as is the case with all things in our lives. So doesn't just stop at labor. It's, spreads across everything. So Dan, how about you? Any final thoughts and any points of reference that you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure. So we at Foundation for Ranch Management have a ranch management apprenticeship program that both apprentices or ranch owners and managers alike can subscribe to. So they can contact me for that. But also, I wanted to make one comment. I was talking to a professional who deals in ranch succession across 11 Western states. And he was very emphatic about the fact that there are plenty of ranches that would take on young people, young producers, with the goal of them taking over their ranch. It is not as uncommon as people might think it is, because on the face of it looks, wow, that's altruistic. Somebody would just give away their ranch. No, that's not the way it works. You have to earn your way through it. But his point was really timely, and that is, if the opportunities are out there, okay, and so right away we come up against that whole age-old question: people don't want to work anymore, right? Well, maybe we're not here talking to the people who don't want to work, okay? Maybe we're talking to the best of the best. And if you hear something in this podcast that speaks to you, that's what I would encourage you to act upon. Find a way to act upon that desire in you and don't ignore it.
Dan, because you brought up that potential that if you don't have the ranching background, you think that someday this is your dream and you aspire to, and there are people that are out there that don't have clear heirs or just want to make sure that their legacy gets managed in a way that they would approve of. We get this question all the time at the Rancher Stewardship Alliance. How do I find that rancher who wants to do that? Is the encouragement that I'm hearing from you just join an apprenticeship program, kind of get your foot in the door through something like that?
Right. And that's a big question in the industry right now, because there have been those organizations, I believe Northwest Ag Credit in years past tried to put together a program to marry up the two interested parties, and that was discontinued. American Farm Trust, I believe, is working on a program. But I think a lot of people have wondered and wrestled with, is this a chicken or egg thing for so long, that it just has not gotten the attention that it deserves. And I know Rachel is going to have another guest on who's also working intently specifically on identifying both parties and putting them together as well. So it's something that is getting more attention just in the last year or two. And I think we should expect to see a decent solution come along pretty soon.
And I think by and large, for most people in agriculture, of course, they want to have some money to retire on, but it's not about making it big. It really is making sure that the legacies continue, the stewardship continues, the culture continues. They want that to be able to live on. So, such an important point, Dan. Rachel, I asked if for Dan and for Taylre, if they had interns that were, waiting in line to get into, and apprentices waiting in line to get into these types of programs. But talk to me about ranches. Do we have a lot of ranches that are opening doors now? Is it starting to get more popular? You have to place 10 to 12 or so interns each year into ranches. Is it something that's easy, or is that still a challenge?
Yeah, the question I get asked all the time is, do you have enough ranches that are interested in taking the interns in your program? And my answer is yes, but do I have the right ranches? So there's a lot of ranches who are interested. They see this and they see the potential of it, but the reality of it is not every ranch is cut out to be an intern host. It does take that certain amount of dedication. So giving ranches options has been really helpful. I work with a number of other apprentice and internship programs, some of them as short as 2 weeks. And so it helps those ranches maybe start off small and get an idea of what is the amount of time and what kind of care and feeding and nurturing do these young people need coming in. And it also helps them to be really intentional. Both Taylre and Dan talked about understanding what you need from an employee and what you're willing to give, and being able to really line that out intentionally and clearly is important. So the answer back to your question, Haylie, is yes, the interest is growing. I am going to have maybe the easiest time placing the most interns that I've ever had this time, because the program is gaining traction for the student side, but we're also gaining traction and recognition on the ranching side. And people are definitely interested. What I love to see is, ranch folks are good folks, and they care about people. They care about the next generation genuinely. And that is the common denominator I see. I get a lot more ranches that are really interested from the altruistic perspective of just seeing what is coming down the line from a succession standpoint, seeing what is happening to the industry. And they really want to invest in that next generation. They want to see people there who are there not just because they have big bank accounts and can afford to be there, but they're there because they want to be there genuinely. So yeah, that interest is increasing. And I think it's just helping those ranches understand where in this process is best for me to plug in. Should I plug into that 2-week just experiential internship? I say internship kind of loosely, plugging into a summer long? Do I look at a multi-year apprentice program? And just being honest with themselves about who they are and where they fit the best is going to avoid a lot of frustration for them moving into the future. So interest is there on both sides. It's just managing those expectations for both sides, understanding realistically where I can plug into that process based on their experiential level from a young person standpoint, or from their willingness to invest in time and training and a longevity of that position from the ranch standpoint. We get those things cleared and ironed out and get the right match, and we can avoid a lot of frustration.
Thank you to Rachel, Dan, and to Taylre for joining us today. So seasonal labor, again, just cut and dry. You pay somebody to do a job that needs to get done. Internship, that shifts more into not paying quite as much, but you are teaching quite a bit more. Lots of hours invested there, and you're just with that person for a short spurt of time as you're really bringing an inexperienced worker into the industry. And then an apprenticeship really raises the bar, higher expectations on both sides, the focus on teaching thought processes along with logistics. Great conversation. Come back again here in 2 weeks. We are going to be talking to Dr. Trey Patterson with the Padlock Ranch and discussing how to hire a good employee. How do you go through the interview process? How do you get the word out there? All of that and more in a couple of weeks. If you like what you're listening to, make sure to subscribe and share our podcast with a friend.